After 20 years spent wearing boots on foreign soil, most of it dry and dusty and hostile, I thought coming home to the old family acreage would feel quiet, just silence, honest silence. I wasn't looking for a trophy life, you know. Just the cornfields, the worn-out red barn my grandfather built, and the old John Deere 4020 sitting in the corner rusting away. That was my mission. Peace rebuilt from the ground up, one repaired fence post at a time. But what I didn't account for, what none of my training, not the IED awareness, not the night raids, not even the bureaucratic nonsense in DC, prepared me for, was Brenda Thorne. She was the HOA president of Blackwood Crest Community, that sterile little slice of suburban beige that had crept right up to my western fence line about 15 years ago, all tight rows of stucco, 3-car garages, and lawns that looked suspiciously like green carpet. You could smell the farm when the wind shifted. But I swear they spent half their lives pretending the world ended at their granite countertops. Brenda showed up on my porch the second day I was back, clipboard in hand, looking like a freshly starched admiral. She didn't knock. She pounded. "You're the new owner," she stated. Peering past me into my old rancher like she was checking for mold. "I am," I said, leaning on the doorframe, still dressed in a faded military t-shirt, trying not to laugh. She offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was pure polished plastic. "Brenda Thorne, HOA president. We need to clarify some community expectations, namely your equipment. We have visual covenants." I almost choked on my coffee. "Ma'am," I said, gesturing to the 100 acres of cracked earth behind me, "this isn't part of Blackwood Crest. It's been farm use, zoned agricultural, in my family since 1948. Your covenants don't cross that fence." Her smile twitched. And that was the first sign she was truly dangerous, the refusal to acknowledge reality, the immediate jump to offense. "I see, but adjacency matters. Unsightly machinery affects our aesthetic standard. We expect respectful cooperation, Mr. Sterling." I didn't utter another word. I just gave her the quiet, unflinching stare I'd learned to use on hostile interrogators. I held the silence until she finally got uncomfortable, shifted her iron-stiff hair, muttered, "Have a nice day," and retreated in a huff. I thought that was the end of it, just a fleeting territorial flick of the wrist. I was dead wrong. Within a week, a formal typed notice was hand-delivered. No mail, just a printed threat citing obscure regulations that, as I later confirmed, applied only inside their borders. I tossed it straight into the wood stove. This wasn't just neighborly annoyance. This was psychological warfare, an attempt to use paperwork and perceived authority to push me off my own land. And I realized I was facing a different kind of enemy now, one that uses fear and regulations instead of bullets. Then came the drone, a soft, annoying buzz hovering over my field while I was wrestling with the old Deere's carburetor. It would dip low enough to stir the weeds, flashing its little camera light. I knew it was Brenda. Her second-floor balcony was perfectly positioned to spy on my barn. I just waved, kept working, and made a mental note. Surveillance had begun. That night, a grainy photo of my tractor, my father's tractor, appeared in the Blackwood Crest digital newsletter. The caption was pure, unadulterated fear-mongering. Heavy machinery near walking trails. New resident raises safety concerns. This wasn't just about aesthetics. This was character assassination, and I realized this woman was gunning for a fight. But here's the thing about me. I operate on facts, on hard boundaries, and on documentation. I wasn't fighting for vanity. I was fighting for my inheritance, for the integrity of the soil. I had rights I fought for overseas, and I wasn't about to surrender them here. I confirmed everything with the county zoning officer, a weary-looking guy named Tom, who chuckled when I mentioned Brenda. "She files complaints weekly," he muttered, "usually about wind chimes or paint colors. First time it's been about corn." He signed off on everything. Legal, inspected, operational. Next, the countermeasures. I started the Blackwood Crest files, a folder where I logged every notice, every email, every drone sighting, time-stamped and airtight. And then the kicker. My military brain kicked into full security mode. I installed 3 high-resolution security cameras, one hidden under the barn awning, a second facing the gravel path, and a third, discreetly mounted inside a hollowed-out fence post facing their side of the property line. If Brenda crossed the line, if she even thought about crossing it, I would have the whole thing recorded. I wasn't looking for a fight, but I was damn sure prepared for one, using documentation as my armor. The harassment intensified. Neighbors started giving me cold looks, clearly influenced by the constant stream of HOA propaganda. Someone threw trash over my fence one morning, a pathetic little gesture that just told me she was testing boundaries, escalating from paper threats to petty crime. I didn't retaliate. I just cleaned it up, repainted the fence, and confirmed the cameras were running. The waiting, the quiet tension, that's what gets to you, and I knew she was running out of moves. The harvest was the last fuse. The harvest season finally hit. It was early morning, the sun barely hitting the eastern trees, when I fired up the 40-20. It wasn't quiet, it was a 70-year-old tractor. It roared, but it was an honest sound, a sound of industry and life. I was focused, lost in the rhythm of reclaiming the land, thinking about my dad when I saw her. Standing at the edge of her manicured lawn, separated by the fence my father built Brenda, in a blindingly red tracksuit and a sun hat the size of a satellite dish, filming me with her phone on the next pass, I stopped the tractor briefly to check the header. She was yelling, though I couldn't hear her over the engine's residual rumble. Her gestures were crystal clear, a pointed finger, her hand dramatically covering her nose. The dust. I walked over, wiping sweat and field grit from my face. "Morning, Brenda," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "This is completely unacceptable." She shrieked, her voice thin and sharp. "My cushions are ruined. I can't breathe over the stench of diesel. You are choking the entire neighborhood." "It's corn harvest, Brenda," I stated, leaning slightly on the fence. "It's been done this way for decades. This land is zoned agricultural. You bought a house next to a farm. Farms harvest. They make noise, they make dust." She went beet red. "We have standards. There are children napping. I have guests arriving." "Ma'am, with all due respect," I replied, giving her a slow, deliberate look, "your guests will survive the sight of food being grown." That was the last straw for her manufactured composure. She let out a sound like a punctured tire and stormed back inside. I finished my pass, but I couldn't shake the feeling of the calm before the storm. I knew she was out of rules to hide behind, which meant she was about to invent her own reality, and I knew what that meant: recklessness. It happened that afternoon. I had the tractor parked temporarily just off the gravel easement road, the blades folded up, right where I always leave it to walk the irrigation line. I was tying off a loose hose when I heard the roar of a car engine. Too fast, too close, and I looked up just in time to see her silver Lexus tearing down the easement. She wasn't slowing down. She was accelerating. She slammed straight into the front quarter panel of my John Deere 4020 with a sickening, expensive crunch of plastic and metal. The Lexus bounced back, the horn blaring, a long, panicked scream of metal. Brenda scrambled out, phone already glued to her ear. She was trembling, but her voice was pitched high, trembling just enough to sound victimized. "Yes, I need officers immediately. He assaulted me with a vehicle, a tractor. He left it in the road on purpose." I didn't move. I didn't say a word. I walked over slowly, crossed my arms, and just waited, letting the panic play out. Then she did the thing that handed me the war. She spotted a piece of concrete rubble by the road, snatched it up, and hurled it at the tractor's windshield. Crack! A perfect spiderweb fracture across the glass. I didn't flinch. I just looked up, right into the lens of camera 3, the one hidden in the fence post. It caught the acceleration, the impact, the false 911 call, and the vandalism. She had no idea how perfectly she had just incinerated her own defense. 10 minutes later, Officer Diaz arrived. I knew his family, good people, fair people. Brenda, still playing the victim, rushed him, pointing at the dent in her Lexus. "He left that machine there to intimidate me, officer. I'm terrified. Look what he did to my vehicle." Diaz, to his credit, just looked at the damage, then walked straight to me. "You all right, Mac?" "Fine," I said. "Tractor's got a dent and a cracked windshield. She says I left it in the road. I pulled it to the side while I checked the valve," I explained. "She tore down the easement and rammed it." "Got it all, officer. 3 angles. Everything from the acceleration to the crash to the rock." I reached into my pocket and handed him the USB drive. It was labeled time-stamped airtight. He took the drive, his eyes narrowed, and he nodded, slow and deliberate. "I want the truth documented, officer," I said, "and I want her to stop weaponizing law enforcement to try and run me off my own land." Diaz went back to Brenda. I could hear her sputtering when he asked her to wait while he reviewed the evidence back at the station. She demanded a supervisor, demanding rank, demanding someone who would listen to her authority, but Diaz just got into his cruiser and drove off. The storm had shifted, and I knew the war was no longer being fought on the physical ground, but on the intellectual and legal field. I went back to work, but my brain didn't stop. I drove down to the county clerk's office that morning and pulled every map, zoning file, and property document related to Blackwood Crest. What I found was better than gold. It was total leverage. It turned out the easement road they used was under a conditional access permit that had expired because the developer never finalized a maintenance agreement. Translation: Brenda and the HOA had zero legal right to regulate that gravel road. She'd smashed her luxury car into a legally parked piece of equipment on a road that wasn't hers to claim. I called my lawyer, Dan Hollis. "You're going to love this, Dan. She just handed us a civil suit, a property damage claim, and an easement violation. But I didn't stop there. I needed to cut the roots of her authority entirely. I went deeper, requesting public access to the HOA's financial filings. Brenda had been president for 7 years, and the ledgers were a mess. Unauthorized $500 monthly stipends labeled administrative overhead paid to herself, thousands in payments for landscaping with no contracts, and guess who was getting the money? Her nephew. It was a slush fund protected by her false authority, and this was the weapon that would finish the job. I spent an entire night assembling the full package, the video links, the police report, the zoning maps, and the proof of HOA fraud. I printed 26 copies, one for every single mailbox in Blackwood Crest. Before dawn, I walked the sidewalks, clipped them under doormats, and left them nestled against mailboxes. I wasn't just defending my land. I was giving the community the truth she had worked so hard to conceal. By 8 a.m., the Blackwood Crest online community, which I was naturally blocked from, had exploded. Screenshots were flying. Neighbors were shocked. She said my husband voted for her reappointment. He didn't. We paid thousands in dues and there are no receipts. Around noon, 3 solemn-looking HOA board members, people I'd barely waved to, showed up at my door. Mr. Sterling, the man in the middle, a retired accountant named Paul, said awkwardly, "We need to speak privately." We had no idea about half of this. I sat them down, poured coffee, and showed them the full video loop, Brenda's acceleration, the horrific crash, the false report, the rock throwing, the moment she lost all self-control. Within hours, they called an emergency meeting. By the end of the evening, Brenda Thorne was voted out of the HOA presidency for gross misconduct and the misuse of community funds. The whole little kingdom had collapsed, but Brenda, being Brenda, didn't accept reality. The next day, I got a certified letter. She was suing me civilly for emotional distress, defamation, and intentional interference with neighborhood integrity. It was a final, desperate act of flailing, mistaking fear for power. I drove the paperwork straight to Dan Hollis. He just smiled. She wants court? We give her court. Countersuit, malicious prosecution, property damage, harassment, and we petition for a full independent county audit of the HOA books. We went to court. Brenda's lawyer, flailing, tried to claim my footage was doctored. But the metadata, the timestamps, the law, it all held. The judge, a man with a face like granite and a patience forged by decades of listening to people who confuse opinion for law, finally addressed Brenda. "Miss Thorne," he said after viewing the crash and vandalism video, "it is the opinion of this court that not only are your claims unsubstantiated, but your actions represent a clear abuse of legal process." He dismissed her entire suit with prejudice, meaning she could never file it again. He then ordered her to pay me full damages, legal fees, and the fine for false reporting. He referred the HOA for a full county audit, officially ending her reign. A week later, a for sale sign went up on her lawn. No farewell party, no dramatic goodbye post, just a single moving truck pulling away on a cold Thursday morning. The same silver Lexus, repaired now, rolled past my gate one last time, windows tinted, never looking back. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. I walked out to the barn and looked at the old John Deere. It still bore a faint scar on the fender, a dent I left there, a reminder that it stood unflinching in the face of pure entitlement. The best moment? A few weeks later, I was out by the barn, tightening a bolt, when a kid, maybe 10 years old, walked up to the fence. He was wearing a baseball cap and holding a notebook. "Mr. Sterling?" he asked quietly. "My dad says you fought a war with a tractor." I laughed, a real laugh this time. "Something like that, son. Can I see it?" he asked, pointing to the old 40-20. "Only if you help me put this wrench away," I replied. He climbed up, notebook tucked under his arm, and helped me secure the last tool. That was the true victory. Finding the quiet again. Not the passive quiet of ignoring conflict, but the earned peace that comes from standing your ground with nothing but roots and the absolute truth. I'd won not just for myself, but for a whole community that realized the silence they feared wasn't emptiness. It was the strength that finally made the loudest tyrant pack her bags and leave. So what do you think? Was I right to go nuclear on the fraud charges, or should I have just taken the settlement and let her walk away and disappear quietly? Does true justice require dismantling the system that enables the bully, or is self-defense enough? Let me know in the comments below. And if you've ever had to fight for what's yours against a clipboard bully, hit that like button and tell me you